So I thought, why don't we build a truck, a mobile studio that I'm sitting in right now, and it can go to, farther afield. It can do an event in Ottawa, it can go to Montreal, it can Buffalo, wherever, or maybe there's some VIP who just hasn't got time at the Toronto Film Festival to come to the studios. So the studio goes to them. Dejero Gateway, 14 cellular antennas on the roof, a rack of encoders, and an 8 high-performance Starlink antenna. So Starlink does the heavy lifting, but it's shaky. It has dropouts. So the Dejero Gateway smooths it out, and the signal is perfectly smooth.
Hello, I'm Evie Cuervo with Dejero. Welcome to Critical Connections, a podcast that features the stories of the people and companies helping to keep our communities connected, informed, and safe. Let's, for a brief moment, travel back in time. You're a news team racing against deadline, getting ready for a live hit at the top of the 6 o'clock news. The producer is counting down to the reporter, but then just as they start talking about the day's big story, the feed drops. Anybody in news has been there. Thankfully, a lot has changed. Innovations such as Dejero's smart blending technology is making work in the field more seamless for news teams. Joining me now are two people who've witnessed the dramatic shift in broadcasting. First is Lawrence Partington, the Chief Innovation Officer and founder of TV2GO. That's a video transmission services company in Toronto, Ontario, that offers broadcasters live solutions via satellite, fiber, bonded cellular, and video over IP. Lawrence is a longtime Dejero customer and has led the way on many cutting-edge projects, which we will chat about today. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you for having me.
And here with us is also Michael Stanton, Dejero's Director of Sales for the Americas. He started his career working in newsrooms, from a news photographer to assignment manager. He really has seen it all. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Evie.
Okay, let's get started. Lawrence, let's go back to the early days. You and your partner in Work and Life, Carol, started a sports production company in the 80s. Starting in film and moving to video. And then, like many broadcasters at the time, you started renting satellite trucks and eventually started buying them. You have covered the Calgary and Vancouver Olympics with your suite of trucks. Talk to us about that time and some of the challenges that you faced.
Our niche in the broadcasting world was always, we were the private producers who could get access faster than anybody else. It was always, we'll get your project air before the competition. So in the earliest days when we were shooting film, that led to all kinds of crazy things. We were chartering planes to get to a film lab. We were editing video in chartered jets. My favorite one, though, Carol Patterson, my partner and camera woman, she was in Europe filming World Cup ski racing, filming 16 millimeter. She would shoot the film, run to the nearest airport, and in those days, you could go up to someone and say, "Oh, you're flying to London. Would you mind carrying this can of film? Don't open it. Oh, no, you'll ruin it." And they said, "Fine." And someone from ABC or BBC would get the film and satellite it back to Canada, and I'd distribute it. And we did crazy stuff. And it became so much easier, we thought, with satellite trucks. We embraced those in a big way. But Dejero is a whole new level.
That's very cool. Michael, you were also, in the news business. What was it like? What do you remember of those days?
Yeah, I remember I used to be an assignment editor for a number of years, an assignment manager. I just remember we were so focused on the logistics around gathering the news and getting the video and interviews back to the station in a reasonable amount of time to make air. And, I found out about Dejero technology, and I was like, this is a game changer. And it really was. It revolutionized the industry.
And, for me, I was also in the news business. I remember the early days cutting tape to tape in Northern Ontario and, eventually learning about the Dejero Pelican cases that you can take anywhere. So it's kind of interesting how we all come full circle with this conversation. Lawrence, I wanted to ask you sort of a follow-up, which was you ended up moving away from satellite trucks about 10 years ago, and then you began to buy a whole bunch of Dejero gear. I'm curious what attracted you to Dejero back then. So Talk to us about some of those first products you tried out.
Sure. Well, we saw in the satellite truck business, we were half news and half broadcast sports. The sports business remained, but news just vanished. It disappeared overnight to Dejero and bonded cellular. We actually were made an offer we couldn't refuse we had a very high-end satellite truck in 2014. Dome Productions, a big player in the Canadian market, bought it. And we did a non-compete for 5 years. I had to stay out of the satellite truck business. So we still had a teleport and all these other facilities, but we were looking for alternatives because our customers were still asking for transmission solutions. So we went with the first thing was I think you called it a Go box. It was that Pelican case. Had a couple of those, and then NGO came. We went through a few generations of NGO with the H.264 and H.265 encoding. But my favorite has been the Gateway. Now we're back in the satellite business now. We have satellite trucks, but we're putting gateways in the satellite trucks because even though satellite remains the gold standard for transmitting live sports, it can be weather affected. And having another route back, maybe SRT over internet, back to the teleport has saved us a couple of times.
So interesting. It's always interesting to me to hear how people come about the Dejero products or how they're introduced to it, and then how they begin to use it and put it in workflows across different sectors. Michael, it was about 10 years ago that you made the leap from broadcasting to working with Dejero. Tell us about that change, because I think it's interesting and it applies to the discussion.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of change in the news industry. Back from when I started, I started working in TV in the late 90s, and everything was really reliant on video and video-based uncompressed video transmission. And now we talked about gateway. Really the future is just moving ones and zeros, and so Dejero's done a really good job of kind of taking the future of what we see IP connectivity and building it into the gateway product.
One really cool thing about this podcast right now is always showing the different types of connections from different cities around the world. For example, right now I'm just on a local, network. So are you. But Lawrence, you're in a special network right now.
I am on a gateway. I'm practicing what I preach. I'm sitting in a truck right now, talking to you. I've got a camera in front of me, and I've got gateway and this video program that you're running with Riverside. But it's running on the gateway. I've got a great connection. Works well.
That's so cool, Lawrence. You're winning in life right now with this connection. I wanted to ask you, because you've done some pretty interesting projects. You've had some interesting workflows, and one of them includes the Canadian Space Agency. You worked with them once in 2012 using satellite trucks, and then again in 2019 using Dejero Gateway technology. Tell us how that switch made the difference.
In 2019, David Saint-Jacques, a Canadian astronaut, was on the International Space Station. And the Canadian Space Agency wanted to do live interactive events with schools and politicians and VIPs and business conferences, and any time they could get a crowd together who wanted to talk to an astronaut floating upside down in space. When the International Space Station is over North America, for 28 minutes, a tracking satellite in Houston can just see it going over the horizon. So you have 28 minutes, plus or minus 30 seconds. So we had to time it very precisely. But NASA got the signal and put it up on another domestic satellite, a GEO satellite. TV2GO downlinked it in Toronto at our teleport. And then Chief Engineer Faisal streamed it. The key tech, we had in a flight case a waypoint. So anywhere we went, we were in Inuvik, we were in Tuktoyaktuk, we were in Umiak, in Nunavik in northern Quebec, remote spots. And we were able to get the signal streamed to us, put it up on a big screen, and then we used an NGO to transmit the students' or the politicians' questions back to NASA. There was about a 5-second delay, but the astronaut would hear the question and talk to the kids. It was very, very cool. And they were all streamed on YouTube or and they were available to TV news.
That's so interesting. You've seen so many evolutions in the world of broadcasting. The pandemic was, of course, a dramatic shift for really, for so many people around the world. You and Carol ended up selling your business, but that didn't slow you down. You're still working with TV2GO as a chief innovation officer. So, that means essentially you're always looking for the next best new thing. One of your latest projects was building a remote studio in a van for big networks. Tell us about that.
Well, part of TV2GO, there's TV2GO International now, it reincorporated in 2020. Part of that business has always been live studios. So when we have a little single camera studio in Toronto where guests for CNN or Fox or BBC would come in, sit down, put in an earpiece like this and a microphone and talk to Anderson Cooper in New York or Atlanta or wherever. So that's great for the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. And there are lots of these studios around North America, but very few in Canada. So I thought, why don't we build a truck, a mobile studio that I'm sitting in right now, and it can go to, farther afield. It can do an event in Ottawa. It can go to Montreal. It can Buffalo, wherever, or maybe there's some VIP who just hasn't got time at the Toronto Film Festival to come to the studios. So the studio goes to them. The more I thought about it, this could also work as an uplink truck. I mean, the connectivity is fabulous. This can be a satellite truck that actually works going down the road, and it's so much cheaper than an uplink truck. So, I mean, for a customer wanting to rent this kind of vehicle, so quickly it has Dejero gateway, 14 cellular antennas on the roof, a rack of encoders depending on what the client wants to use, and an high-performance Starlink antenna. So Starlink does the heavy lifting, but it's shaky. It has dropouts. So the Dejero gateway smooths it out, and the signal is perfectly smooth. It's a great combination. Why don't we put a production switcher in it too, and it could do small-scale programs. So I just keep adding features to this thing. And
so interesting.
Do you want me to take you for a quick look? Okay, all right. I'll start the tour right here. Here's our Blackmagic Designs 8-input ISO switcher. We're set up right now for remote studio configuration. This is the kind of thing where TV2GO offers the service to the likes of CNN, Fox News, PBS, BBC. When there's a guest in Toronto, they come into the studio. Now we can go farther afield with this vehicle. We've got LED lighting with nan light soft boxes, both sides, fully adjustable for color, temperature, and intensity. There's our battery indicator there. We can run 18 hours and 26 minutes more at this battery load. Prompter, there's a rack with the encoders in it, like the LTN global encoder, which the networks all seem to prefer for live interviews. There's the all-important Dejero gateway and its companion Starlink right beside it. We have seating, the driver and passenger seats spin around, and there's a workstation. The audio operator or graphics op can sit there. Now let's go outside. We have a 2024 Ram ProMaster super high roof. I'm 6 feet tall, so that was important. This vehicle has 7 feet interior headroom. It's a big deal. This port here is for shore power. Just takes a regular 15 amp household circuit, but you don't need it because in the back we have 10 kilowatt hours of lithium phosphate batteries right here. This vehicle will run, as you see it configured with all the monitors running, for like 20 hours. Completely silent and emission free. It would even run going down the road. Now here is a 56-inch flat screen. In the back it's currently showing the multi-viewer.
Thanks for the tour, Lawrence. That was super cool. So from the space station to OB trucks to NASCAR, everybody loves cars, but more importantly, sports cars racing. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Okay, we have a client, Joel Robinson, shoots NASCAR Canada. That's a domestic second tier NASCAR stock car racing series. He has one event, takes place at an airport in Quebec. He's not allowed to lay cables at his event. So our solution for the really hardcore fans who want to stream it on TSN Plus and Flow Sports, which he has a deal with NASCAR in Charlotte, what we do, we give him 4 Dejeros on 4 key cameras. His director is calling the race, like telling him who to cover. I'm pretty experienced in car racing too, so I can see what he's doing. I'm switching in our studio in Toronto with the 4 incoming shots. We're adding computer graphics, and his announcer is in a third location, a couple of 100 kilometers away at another racetrack, and he's seeing it streamed, and he's coming back to us over SRT, and it all comes together, and it's, a live car race courtesy of Dejero.
And you're using in that instance Engos, yes?
Ngo, yeah. Actually, all of the NASCAR events have at least one Ngo. That's the front end. He goes to all the races, even with a mobile, and streams them back to TV2GO, because from TV2GO we're able to send SDI fiber to some broadcasters who want it that way, RTMP to others, SRT to others, and there's a European taker as well. So we can add many flavors, including satellite.
When we look to the future of the broadcasting industry, what do you think lays ahead? We all know that there's been, significant budget cuts across the industry. We've seen layoffs. It is the reality of the times. I want to get the insights from the both of you, and maybe let's start with Michael first. What are your thoughts on what are some of the things that we'll see in the next year that could potentially impact workflows?
Yeah, I would say, we've really seen a lot of consolidation around North America in the media industry, and it's really driving a lot of efficiencies. Some of those may be, good things, right? People don't think about the good things they would do. But I think what we're starting to see, especially in larger markets, is you're starting to see more community journalists who are powered by Dejero, right? So they're actually embedded in a local community. They may live there. Like it's a project that one of our customers does here in Los Angeles, and it's really bringing local content to the viewers in that area. So I think as technology has helped progress that along, where back in the day, you needed the microwave, you needed the satellite truck, you needed all of this equipment, usually needed a 2 to 3 person crew to do a story. Now they can send one person out to cover that and make an impact in the community.
What about yourself, Lawrence? What are your thoughts on what lays ahead for the broadcasting industry?
I think it's all about hybrid workflows for transmission. Big time sports, the Super Bowls, the NFL, they're going to stay with satellite because the transmission, even though it's expensive, it's a tiny, insignificant fraction of the rights fees and the production costs at stake. So there's no point in taking any kind of chance. They'll have 2 satellite trucks and a fiber optic plan as well. But you drop down a tier for sports that are more of interest to maybe the streaming audience, like that NASCAR project. They can't afford a satellite truck. It just isn't justified. So if you can get the same quality, because the audience doesn't want the quality to go down, the quality has to stay there, but the producer doesn't have that revenue, so he's looking to save money. And the Dejero Starlink combination is a fabulous solution compared to a satellite truck. The vehicle, depending on which flavor of Dejero you're renting, it's at least $1,000 a day cheaper, and there's no space time, right? Which is $250 an hour, US dollars. So significant savings.
Wow. On one hand, you want the most resilient connectivity, but on the other, it needs to fit within the constraints of a very, challenged budget. What does success look like for you, Lawrence, for your customers and for yourself?
What does it look like to me? Well, I feel we have to do 80% of the job for 20% of the cost. I think that's the goal. And it's coming all over the place. The cost of cameras is so much cheaper today in real dollars. Forget inflation. So much cheaper today than it was 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20. I mean, it used to need a mortgage to buy a Betacam. now camcorders,
A lot of things have changed.
my iPhone is better, you know. The technology is just getting better and better. So young producers going into the sports field, which is my expertise, they just have to, no matter what they taught them in film school, they have to look to the next generation of products, artificial intelligence, the cloud-based editing, file sharing, remote production, and things like Dejero. It's for transmission and delivery. It's an exciting time, but I think the people who can master the new tech will do well. There are more broadcasters, if you count all the streamers, than ever before. So there's more of a market. It's a smaller market, like smaller audience, smaller budget, but more venues, more events.
Yeah, what I'm so excited about the future of Dejero is really the IP connectivity that we're really starting to offer everywhere, from the advancement in Starlink, like Lawrence mentioned, or even KUIP based satellites, the GEOs and LEOs that we're now working with. We really have a bright future ahead.
Well, thank you both for this insightful and fascinating conversation. To learn more about Dejero's critical connectivity for captivating coverage for broadcasters or to book a demo, head to dejero.com.